Dave back? Dave? Anybody? Okay, future tech? Who's doing future tech? The future is now. Wes is doing future tech. Nice.
Have I got the trip down the stairs?
You know how to make an entrance.
I know how to make an entrance.
There you go.
So I'm not quite sure how I got up here because in a theoretically democratic process and without, with my rejection of the nomination, here I am anyway. So I got drafted. So I'm going to get some personal gain out of this. My name's Wes Wu from Towers Parent. If I could just get everyone real quickly to do a hi Wes in unison, that would be great on the count of 3. So could we do that? So hi Wes on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Hi, Wes!
Okay, so being one of the guys on the margins on this board and not being terribly great about coming up with the markers, once you've had this digitized, since we're talking about future tech, once you've had this digitized, I'll figure out a script to write and automate the process of linking myself to everybody else in this room.
Beautiful.
So, thank you, Jeff. In future technology, we actually started out we really started out with, what some of the current problems are, and wound up at a place where, talking about the lowest level and the core level of technology that we have available to us in talent acquisition. And that really turned out to be, the phone book, Microsoft Outlook, things like Plaxo. And there was some agreement and disagreement as to whether that was enough for a recruiter's role, or whether we whether we truly needed additional technology around that. The conversation really started to evolve to a place where we decided that, the current state of technology, applicant tracking systems, human capital management systems, etc. The current state of technology hasn't really failed us, but that we've actually failed the current state of technology. So if we look at things like shelfware, we came up with a figure, and we don't actually know if it's true or not. But 60% of the software that's bought by corporate America never even gets installed. And then you get into the, so all of this doesn't get installed. How much of it doesn't get implemented? And then from how much of it doesn't get implemented, how much of it doesn't then go through a change management process that you would apply to your managers, your employees, and your end users? And so the real issues with the current state of technology is not in the fact that the functionality doesn't work, because I think we all agree that the functionality is actually there. But instead, that we haven't applied the technology, and we haven't asked our employees to adopt the technology in the appropriate ways. So there are a couple of things in terms of future technology. So one of the things that we talked about briefly is that, for future technology to truly work, first of all, it has to be installed. Number 2, it has to actually be implemented. Those would be really good things. But additionally, on top of that, you have to be able to apply change management, or whatever you want to call it, whether it be education, whether it be training classes, communications, or whatever it might be. You have to get user adoption. We also spent quite a bit of time with talking about a topic that's been up here quite a few times, actually. And that was the concept of social networks. And we've actually retermed it as automated affinity networks. First of all, automated, because clearly you have to have some user control, you have to have some linkages that are easy to maintain, that are easy to build. Affinity, because we didn't want simply social networks. One of the examples that was brought up was that without a direct relationship with another person. You might have gone to the same school with somebody, so you have an affinity with that person without having an actual relationship. And so it needs to go beyond the social one-to-one. I've actually made contact with this person, and so we added, the affinity to automated affinity networks. Another key to this was that it really needed to be mobile. So there was a great debate over the phone as the core level of technology that we use versus the PC. And what it really comes down to is it doesn't really matter what the technology is, so long as it's small enough to be mobile and powerful enough to meet the computing needs of connecting with other people. And whether you choose that to be the method of the phone in an actual conversation, or you choose that to be some sort of a web linking with somebody, email, or some other Web 2.0 method, that's fine as well. And then, of course, it needs to be global in nature. By global in nature, we don't necessarily mean global, as in the entire world, because clearly there are going to be some privacy issues with, whatever other countries are sitting out in the EU and all of that. However, it does need to be more expansive than your own personal LinkedIn network. So we've talked about LinkedIn a number of times where, someone leaves your organization, they take their network with them. But if it's a global network in nature, then, or a broader network in nature, then you maintain those relationships. So there's been a lot of talk about these social networks, or what we're calling the automated affinity network. And I think it's a good vision. I think it's it's a way to solve a lot of problems, although it is clearly future technology. There are the social networks that are smaller social networks today, but nothing necessarily as expansive as what we'd envision. So that was basically the synopsis of our session, and I would assume, I was going to just say, I would assume that we were so thorough and stunning that we would have no questions, but we have.
Just a couple points. You talked about the sort of emphasis being on us in terms of using the technology. Do you think there's any part of that technology companies take ownership for, just in terms of features on some of these programs? So if I think of like an ATS versus Google's a very powerful technology, but there's one box. It's not a feature-rich program. Then I take my ATS, and Susan wants me to click 5 different steps to make sure we can track metrics right. Where it, really, I went through one step to hire the person. But I went through one step to hire the person. So my inclination is, I'll do it, but I don't want to do it. So did you guys talk about that aspect at all?
We actually did briefly, and there was a point brought up that the software companies have actually been somewhat public that, hey, they make a living off of people buying people knowing that people are going to buy shelfware, and that they're not necessarily going to force someone to implement it simply because if they're not using it, they don't have to support it, and that's more cash. So they get the licensing fee, but they're not actually spending any money to support it. So I think there's been a shift, right? So there's always been the ERP install base, and as you go to the SaaS model, the software as a service model, and then whatever beyond, there's more and more accountability being built into the actual services. But certainly, there has been a history of software vendors selling, not installing, and very knowingly making huge profits on it.
The future technology we talked about in your situation is that you'll just think about the candidate you just hired and everything will be filled out.
Exactly.
So we're almost there.
Well, when you think about it, a refrigerator was technology at one point, and it keeps your food cold. It does a great job for me. It's like it doesn't take me 75 clicks to get a hamburger out of the refrigerator. But technology now, it seems like it's like we want to solve every little problem with it, and it's just become so feature rich. I think someone I was talking to said they went to a technology show recently, and a remote control that won some contest was this box that looked like a garage door opener. Had one button in the center that was channels and volume. And it's just funny that, it's come around back to a box with channels and volume versus a computer screen sitting in front of you that lets you control 700 feet.
Well, back
That's
to
a good point when you talk about the candidate, because on the flip side, and I'm just curious what the discussion was about the candidate experience, because
definitely a conversation about, hey, the phone is the way to go. Let's get back to basics. Phone, Outlook, all we need, right? And there was some disagreement about that. We actually didn't talk too much, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, we didn't talk too much about the pure candidate experience as much as we talked about what are the factors in technology not being utilized behind our own firewalls, which was really the adoption.
We did talk a little bit about candidates taking advantage of like micro formats and because they're out there taking power over their information, their profiles, their resumes, and choosing where their data is going to go, or being alerted by new organizations or individuals who come and look at who they are and want to see them. And those individuals may drive that, but those might be very simple point solutions that are driven in the candidate market.
Hey,
One more question.
I just want to make a couple points. Technology. One, with software as a service, you're not going to get a lot of shelfware because it's paid by the month, by usage. Second thing I'd like everybody to understand is I'm an ATS vendor, so I'm like a lawyer here, taking a beating.
You and me both, brother.
You know it. A lot of the problems with adoption and ATS software in general is that it's kind of the problem with the term recruiter. Recruiter can mean everybody from the receptionist who processes applications all the way up to a guy who spends his time at the Harvard Club, headhunting. So it's a vast spectrum of roles, and ATS is a vast spectrum of software. Some is very oriented towards recruitment, CRM, relationship building, talent pools, people who aren't members of your organization, literally no applicants to track. Other systems are very much like accounting systems, which are specifically going to track metrics for applicants. And if you've ever worked with the general ledger system, you're going to have 5 steps to put in a general ledger entry or make a chart of account chain. So a lot of times people buy ATS software when they want recruiting software. A lot of times people buy recruiting software when they want ATS software. It's important that you understand what you're buying, first of all, and that drives adoption. And I don't think vendors like shelfware. I don't like shelfware because I like people to use my software because that sells me more software. Users make sales. And non-users, it's never a winning thing to get money for nothing. Nowhere in the economy is it ever good to take money for nothing because it comes back to get you in the end. The other thing I want to say is this about software as a service. A lot of vendors are doing software as a service only, rather than doing installed software. But I'd like everyone to understand that most Windows computers can also be web servers. And most web software, or much web software anyways, can be run within your network. And if you already have a database administrator, and if you already have a web server, and you already have web access, essentially your costs are fixed. So if you use software as a service, you'll have to know that you're giving margin to other organizations for stuff that you already own. So if you're a 5-person outfit, 5 users, and you have access to $1 million worth of technology, software as a service is a great thing. And that's why it's a hype thing, and that's why it's been so successful. But if you're 100 users, and you're going to pay massive money per month, basically forever, your costs will increase linear forever with your usage. Whereas if you license software, the more users you have, the less your cost per user is. And so it's very important that you understand the economics of software as a service if there are options for installing the software. Now, a lot of technology there's not, but a lot of technology there is. You just have to dig around for it. That's all I want to
Thank you.
2 seconds.
Yes, 2 seconds.
I promise 2 seconds. Not everybody, I just wanted to make this point. Not everybody uses LinkedIn for recruiting. Not everybody uses Monster for recruiting. Not everybody uses LinkedIn for networking. Sometimes we use technology for something different than what it was intended. So I think the future, that was something that just was missing. And I wanted to kind of throw it out there.
Thank you. I think technology, there's a lot of incredible conversations that are to be had here, and I am biting my tongue until it's bloody because this is a conversation where I spend a lot of my life and I want to interject. We have to get going. So what I'd like